Good morning.
Good morning.
Some of what we'll share today will be from an online site called TED Talks. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it was Bob Bodie, one of our church friends, who said, Renee, go to TED Talks for information and inspiring facts. So that's part of what, and the actual site, this particular subject is intentional solitude, which is perfect for Lent as we think about on the inside, where is God moving us to be? This week in the oncology unit, visiting cancer patients, I visited with a gentleman who, as soon as he identified me as the chaplain, he physically just reached out and said, "Oh, come." And I said, "What is it?" And he said, "Well, any prayers from anyone is valued by me." He said that 9 years ago he was diagnosed with a different cancer. And he was a very crusty, crabby, mean person at that time. And he wasn't open. He had a strict religion. I don't want to bash it, so I'm not going to say what it was. But he had a strict religion that he followed, and he thought that everybody else was wrong. And he was a very unhappy person. And so he said one day, around 9 years ago when he was diagnosed, he said this man came up to him at work who had tattoos all over his body. He had hair greasy in a ponytail, beard, biker dude. And he said to him, "I'm going to pray for you every day." And he goes, "What?" Because he had a preconception of what that guy, who he was, based on how he looked. Right? It wasn't long after that encounter that suddenly he went into remission. It doesn't happen to everyone, but this was his journey. And he forgot about it. All the years he's been in remission. But now a new cancer has cropped up, and it's worse. And he's lying alone in the hospital bed. And he said, with all this time by myself, lying here in this bed receiving chemotherapy, he goes, all of a sudden, I remember that man, because he had all this time to reflect, to think about his life. And he said it was this time of reflecting that made him realize it wasn't a person that he expected a certain preconceived notion of whose prayers work and whose don't. But he looked back on this biker dude who said, "I'm going to pray for you." And it was the way he said it, as he looked back in retrospect, the way he said it, that made it come back to the truth of the moment for him. So he said, "Chaplain, I don't know what religion you are." And I said, "Swedenborgian." And he goes, "Whoa."
Sweet what?
What? He goes, "Whoa." But then he says, "Great." He says, "I've learned. I've learned." And he said it was all those weeks in the hospital bed that as he reflected on his life, he was constricting God. But the point isn't even that, even though that's a powerful point. The point was is he had time to reflect and find meaning in the moment. Albert Einstein said that he liked to go on long walks on the beach. Long walks on the beach, because he could listen quietly to what was going on in that head of his. He said that when he was working and the work wasn't going well, he would stop what he was doing in the middle of the day and lie down on the floor, this is Einstein, stare at the ceiling, and listen to what his imagination was trying to say. That's a powerful thing. In our society, we are afraid of being alone. We are afraid of solitude. There was a study published in Science magazine in 2014 that studied participants who were placed in a room, and the only thing they could have, and it was just 15 minutes, folks, just 15 minutes, the only thing they could have was their thoughts and an electric shock buzzer. Guess what they did? The electric shock buzzer. They didn't even want to just sit alone with their thoughts quietly, with themselves. They didn't want to sit alone with their own thoughts by themselves in a sense of peace and quiet. And as Einstein said, what is going on in my head? What is being said to me? What is going on? They would rather shock themselves than pay attention to their own inner process, their own mind. We as individuals in this culture, I don't know about others because I haven't lived there, but in this culture, as individuals, we're afraid to be alone, and we're also afraid to be with people who look alone. What about, thankfully you prayed for the people with the school shooting and all the school shootings we've experienced in this country. That person, the shooter, often is the loner.
Victim.
They're alone, and we don't want to be with them. Even just on the anthropological aspect of what we are as physical beings, if we're with a loner, that person could be dangerous. That person isn't wanted. We don't want to be hooked up with an unwanted person. We don't want to associate with that. Antisocial, unproductive person. We assume that. It's painful to be alone. We don't want to be alone. We're afraid of being alone. But there's something to learn. There's something we don't understand as a society about being alone. If we were listening to Theron's reading of the scriptures today, and there's so many in the inspired Word of God, there's so many references to how important it is that God is with someone alone to get the message across. I can't tell you, just to break from that thought for a moment, how many people have family keeping vigil around them in hospice or even on a unit. And they're keeping vigil and they don't want to leave the person alone for 1 second, or they don't want that person to die alone. But guess what happens? They wait. God waits until the loved one has to go to the bathroom. And they come back and they go, oh no, I promised them that they wouldn't be alone. One of my dearest friends, Kitty Green, she had a glioblastoma, a brain tumor with fingers, can't be taken out. Means that at some point her physical life will be taken. She said, Renee, promise me that I won't die alone. I know you can't be with me all the time, but when I'm actually dying, do you promise that you'll be with me? I said, of course. Big mistake. Big mistake. Never make that kind of promise, because we are not God. We are of God, and God is in us, and that's the most real part of who we are. But we are not in the Creator's position. And so what do? Joe and I, we go to Kitty on and off. We go to the nursing home where she actually ended up dying by herself. And I would walk in, her tumor was so progressed that she couldn't even speak, but her eyes could follow us. She knew we were there. She was glad we were there. You could see it. But guess what? She died in the middle of the night. The nurse didn't call, and she was alone. And for how many years did I feel, it was on Christmas Eve, and for how many years did I feel terrible about that? until I became a trained chaplain, and I realized with experience that this is a very sacred solitude moment for so many, not for everyone, but for so many souls. God wants that person one-on-one. And that's a beautiful, sacred thing. And it's important to trust in that. So we have so much in the scriptures of Jesus going off alone. Jesus goes to a mountain. He needs to take a break and recharge after doing a bunch of healing, after offering so much wisdom from heaven to these people. But he gets drained, and he goes off, and he needs that quiet. And it's so important. The benefits of intentional solitude, especially I think this time of year, is extremely powerful. And it's extremely, it waxes the spirit. And so the benefits are in TED Talks. I mean, he just gives us a great list. One of them is absolutely just carte blanche, reduces stress. If anybody here is sitting feeling the stress in your body and in your mind from your life, whatever that means, if you're feeling stress, time alone is extremely healing for stress and tension. There was a man named Chris Bailey who was a productivity expert. Now get this, a productivity expert, Chris Bailey, and he says that it's critical, it's very important in order to be a highly productive person that we have time in our brains in wandering mode. We must daydream to be innovative. We must wander in our thoughts and go off to places that aren't measurable, that we can't calculate or plan. So we're such, who here is a planner? Yeah. Plan. But if the mind is not given time alone to dream, to wonder, to get lost in a thought, we cannot come up with innovative solutions. Creative thoughts. That creativity is one of the hallmark signals of the divine in your life. When you start to feel creative around something, the divine is all over that and all inside of that and leading you through the joy of that creation. Nikola Tesla is an inventor, and he said that the mind is the most keen when in uninterrupted solitude. That we are crippled, that's the word, that's a strong word. We are crippled when we have information coming at us all the time. Literally crippled. And that's why I think the Catholics are very smart. They go off and retreat regularly. I don't know if you've gone to Manresa up on Woodward Avenue, but I plan to do some of that in the spring. And I hope that some of the ladies, we can go on some silent walks and retreats. Wouldn't that be lovely? Wouldn't that be healing? We need it. Our minds need it. A psychologist who studied decades of groupthink, he was from St. Louis, and his name was Keith Sawyer. And he said after decades of study, he said that when we get together as in groups to create something or to come up with something, he said we're far less productive. Far less productive if we try to create in a group. And so the planning committee for this church, I'm going to suggest that we get together briefly, plan a task, and then go off on our own and then come back. Because Keith Sawyer said the best thing to do is to start alone and then share what comes to you later. Interesting, isn't it? And think about how little time we spend in intentional solitude. Not being bored or wishing you were somewhere else. That's different. That doesn't count, sorry. It means that you set the intention to spend time alone to listen to your thoughts like Einstein. Listen to what your imagination is telling you. Let that be where the Spirit is to speak to you. We run for the hills to be alone. We don't want it. We think that it's a weakness. We think that everybody's looking at us. Who likes to go to the movies alone? Anybody here?
I do.
I don't, yeah. I enjoy it. I mean, I've got a soulmate here who loves to go. I mean, we don't have a lot of time, but, this is such a powerful time. When was the last time that you took 15 minutes in your day, intentionally, morning, middle of the day, evening? When was the last time that you actually set the intention to be still and to listen to what's going on inside you? Not what's going on over there and who did what. Not what movie you're going to watch. Not what sermon you're going to plan. But just sat and just noticed what is going on in here. There is so much territory we have not noticed. So much. If you took 15 minutes to do that, or to go for a walk. Just a little bit of time to pay attention to what is going on. And it's so hard. I know that in my Apache training, that in the wilderness for the vision questing, it took 2 days out of 4. I was alone in the woods for 4 days at different times with vision quests. And the first 2 days, I just felt like everything was rattling. I mean, I don't know if you can relate to this, if you've ever gone off on a quiet retreat, but the spirit mind isn't coming forward yet because the physical mind is just clamoring. And it's amazing how internally we resist quiet. But as one chaplain at Beaumont said to me recently, God is the quiet. God is the quiet. And so how would your life change if you did that, even 15 minutes a day at some point that was right for you? Or what if you did it 1 day of every lunar cycle, once a month, for a whole day? If you just spent that whole day alone with your own thoughts and your own process. And you'd have to catch yourself, that's what happens, you'll have to catch yourself thinking about who did what and what were they wearing the other day, and how can they afford that, and I wish I had that vehicle, and I wish my health were better, and I better be able to get that medicine or I'm not going to do well. There's just so many real worries we carry. But those are all defenses against what's going on. Where is God in this noggin? What are your thoughts showing you? What is your imagination showing you? Imagine a world. Imagine a world where everyone practiced the art of alone. There would be more peace, more joy. There wouldn't be, I believe, so much violence. I believe we'd have more safety. I believe we would have more peace. So as we begin Lent, as we begin this journey together, give yourself time. Let go of the busy as much as you can. We all have busy lives. But give yourself the solitude intentionally that you need to know where God is living in you in a moment. Because God is the quiet. God is that voice and that knowing that only shows when you settle down. It's okay, it's safe to be still. And that's what the scriptures are telling us at this time in the liturgy. Be still and know that I am God.